I think culture is a part of every church, whether we like it or not. The Presbyterian church has its own culture. The Pentecostal church has its own culture. Every church has its own culture. And actually, I think the beauty of Orthodoxy in history has been that it goes to a particular place and it becomes one with that culture. To insist on a language is unchristian. It's unscriptural, it's untheological, it's unchristian. Because the whole purpose of the book of Acts, the whole purpose of St. Paul, he went to the Gentiles, he fought this battle. He says, you do not have to become a Jew to become a Christian. What credit is it to you, if you love those who love you? Even sinners do that. There's no credit to that. There's credit to love those who do not love you. We are called to be radical, not to just do the bare minimum. This Samaritan, he could have done much less and still been a good Samaritan. But he did everything and more.
And I think that's the essence of, if anyone's going to turn to your belief system, it's through that. It's not through you telling them, but it's you being like, I'm going to do this for you, and just do it for someone else, not me specifically. I don't want any reward myself. Do it for someone else.
So everything in the Old Testament is fulfilled in this. Every law, every commandment, every act is fulfilled in this. And not only that, every commandment in the New Testament, every commandment that exists, the whole relationship with God and with other people around us is fulfilled in this one verse. If we do what is said here, then we have fulfilled everything that God has put us here to do.
Okay, welcome to Parable Podcast. As you can tell, not at our normal setup, on the couch. Joey kind of upgraded his studio, so we might as well just sit on the couch, chill. Today we've got Chris with us. How are we, Chris?
I'm good. How are you, Tim?
Good, thank God. Doing well.
That's good.
And today we've got our very special guest. We're doing the parable of the Good Samaritan with Father Sam. Get it? Ha ha ha. Dad joke of the day. Okay, yeah. So I have a few questions just to start off with. I'm personally really interested in St. Luke's. From my knowledge, which is not too much knowledge, I'm aware that it's a sort of multicultural Orthodox church. What does that look like?
Yeah, so basically it's a church that is seeking to bring the beauty of Orthodoxy to everyone in this country. To that end, all of our services are in English. It's culturally appropriate to everyone who walks through the doors. Most Orthodox churches in this country, or all Orthodox churches in this country, have a cultural banner attached to them, whether it's Coptic, Greek, Russian, Serbian. And for that reason, anyone who is not from that particular cultural background, when they go to those churches, they never really feel that it's home. They feel alienated. They feel that it may be something that they go and they can look at as a cultural tourist, but it's never somewhere that they will call their own home. So that's why we've, started this Orthodox church as a means to bridge that gap. There is so much richness in Orthodoxy that is hidden away by the cultural baggage we put on top of it. We're trying to take that away and bring that richness out in the open for everyone to see.
I think, Tim, you said before, because you came from a Protestant background,
Yeah.
you were telling me the other day how you found it weird how when you came to the Coptic church, that everyone was Arab.
Yeah. I did word it like that. Yeah, so up until maybe 2 years ago, I grew up in a Protestant church, a Presbyterian to be more specific. Big portion of my family that live here are from a Protestant background, so I would go to their church, and my grandfather, he's like what they'd called elder at the church. So I was actually quite used to an environment which was quite multicultural, had people from all different backgrounds. And when I was getting introduced to Orthodoxy, actually a church that I went to was a multicultural, it was like mixed church in Blacktown called St. Paul's. And I think just initially seeing people from different backgrounds helped, because it made me feel like it's not exclusive to a certain culture, which definitely helped me a lot. And even at the church I currently go to, St. Oneness, there are people from different backgrounds, which is really, really inviting and helpful. But one thing I did experience was that sort of feeling of alienation. I do come from an like Sudanese Egyptian background, but wasn't quite assimilated to the culture. So it felt like I had to not just learn about the Orthodox Church, but learn about like the cultural aspects and what comes with that, and understanding it through that lens. One thing I do really love, and I was looking at the St. Luke's website, and I was like, damn, I wish that if I had this when I first was looking into Orthodoxy, it would help so much. There's a banner. Everyone go on the St. Luke's website if you're looking into Orthodoxy. But there's a banner that says "New Here?" ? And it has all these questions that I've literally over the course of months asked people in the Orthodox Church consistently. It has it all right there. Some common questions and pointers under that banner. It says, like, what could possibly take 2 hours? Another one's Simon says stand up, Simon says sit down. It's like, why are we standing up and sitting down so much? The sign of the cross, that wasn't really explained to me properly until later on. And kissing in the church, which is a big thing for a lot of Protestants looking at the Orthodox Church. It has a bit of a description about that. So yeah, very helpful resource. One thing I was wondering is, did you notice that a lot of the people that come are from a different denomination and they come to church, or is it people that are local just wanting to seek church?
So we have a bit of everything, a bit of a mix. So we have a lot of people now from the local community who are just seeing the sign, and the sign is, all are welcome. Ancient faith in a modern world, and this is a church for you. So people just walk in and are saying, a lot of people walk in don't even know that it's an Orthodox church, don't even know what an Orthodox church is. But they walk in and said, I found this church and I really would love to hear more about it. A lot of people come from other Orthodox backgrounds because, Greeks or Serbians or Macedonians, they're even second or third generation Greeks or Serbians or Macedonians are alienated from their own culture. They don't understand the language. So for them, they still attracted to Orthodoxy, but they're coming to our church because it's in English, it's in a language that they can understand. And as well, a lot of people are coming across from Protestant churches, curious about Orthodoxy and really wanting to discover more about Orthodoxy, because actually most people from Protestant churches have never heard of the Orthodox Church, or they know nothing about it. They know of Catholic, and they don't like Catholic, but they don't know of anything about the Orthodox Church. Yeah. So for them, to have a place where they can learn more and discover more is very eye-opening.
Do you think one of the goals to spread Christianity? One of the goals to spread Christianity, do you think it's to remove the culture?
I think the opposite, actually. I think culture is a part of every church, whether we like it or not. The Presbyterian church has its own culture. The Pentecostal church has its own culture. Every church has its own culture. And actually, I think the beauty of Orthodoxy in history has been that it goes to a particular place and it becomes one with that culture. So it went to Russia and became Russian. It went to Greece and it became Greek. It went to Egypt, it became Egyptian. And the problem is when we try and transplant that culture in a foreign environment. We take the whole of the Greek church or the whole of the Coptic church and we transplant it in a foreign country and we say, let's do mission. This is, I think, the problem. But actually, if we were to, let's say, take a step back and try to evangelize Australia for Orthodoxy, what we would do is we would send missionaries here who knew the language, who spoke the language, who taught them the language, who spoke the same language as the people of Australia, and then gave them Orthodoxy for them to assimilate it into their own culture, for it to become Australian, for the cultural practices to be familiar to them, so that when they go into an Orthodox church, it suits them. They go in and it feels like home, which is what Orthodoxy is meant to do. That's how it does mission. So I think actually, I think the opposite of what you said, in culture is a part of every church. It's what culture? And it's for a particular place, for a particular time.
What would that look like? The Australian Orthodox Church. What if you hear the Australian Orthodox Church? Do you vision in the canteen we're offering meat pies? Or like, what is the Australian Orthodox Church? If you think of that, what do you think that means to you?
Hypothetically, even at St. Luke's, the food that we offer is the food that you would find in a cafe, or it's high quality food, the food you find in a cafe. It's not your traditional Egyptian
I'm
food.
definitely coming.
On the way.
You won't have the kofta sandwiches and all of those things. We put on food that is appealing for people, that the food that people want. And so you're right, the food would look different. The celebrations would look different. The way we pray would look different. The language that we use, all of these things would look different. The icons, everything would be suited for an Australian culture, just like it. Everything, all of those things is suited for an Egyptian culture, suited for a Russian culture. It'd be suited for an Australian culture. And we don't know what that looks like. I mean, that's something that would have to be developed over time. It takes hundreds of years to develop, and to assimilate, the Orthodox Church into a particular culture. But really, seeing that as the end goal, then you can start the process.
We'll show you a video,
Hmm?
and we'll see what you think about the video.
We are selfishly hogging the treasures of the faith, and the Lord God did not give us these treasures so that we can be selfish with them. He gave them so that we could share them with other people. Imagine that there is near your church, down the road, a group of people that are starving. And someone came to them from your church and gave them food, but it was strange food to them that they could not digest. Does that help them? The answer is no. And then you recognize that you have the right food and you can spare it. Should you not give it to them? I think all of us would say, of course. Immediately, without question, let's go serve them. And we would do it. I think spiritually, there are millions of Americans exactly in this situation. And often we are not offering them something that they can digest because we insist on using foreign languages in our services because it makes us feel better. Well, get over it, please. Please, it's not about you feeling better. Especially if you're living here and you're settling here. Let's help people accommodate to the country they've chosen to live in and to learn the English language so that we can offer the treasures and not hog them ourselves.
So what do you think about the video, Father Sam?
I think that what he's saying is entirely common sense, entirely scriptural, and entirely Christian. And the opposite is the opposite of all of those things.
Yeah.
To insist on a language is unchristian. It's unscriptural, it's untheological, it's unchristian. Because the whole purpose of the book of Acts, the whole purpose of St. Paul, he went to the Gentiles, he fought this battle. He says, you do not have to become a Jew to become a Christian. You are a Christian through faith in Christ Jesus. You don't have to follow the Old Testament law. You don't have to be circumcised. You don't have to become a Jew. You just have to have faith in Christ Jesus. So if this is a biblical foundation, if this is a biblical principle, that the first council of the church, the Council of Jerusalem, enshrined this principle, how can we say to people, you have to become Coptic before you become Christian? You have to become Greek before you become a Christian. You have to learn a language before you can discover the Bible and discover the faith. If we say this, we are not Christian. We are the Pharisees of the Old Testament, or the Pharisees of the church, who insisted, said you have to circumcise them and command them to keep the law, as I said in the book of Acts. And Paul and Barnabas had no small dispute and dissension with them. And St. Peter stood up in that council and says, why do you put a yoke on the neck of the brethren, which neither we nor our fathers were able to bear? St. James, who was the pillar, says, I judge that you don't let anyone, all the Gentiles who are turning to the faith, they don't have to follow any of these things. So if this is the faith and this is the truth, then what he's saying makes perfect sense. And I would completely agree with that, that we cannot force people to go through a culture to come to Christ. That being said, there are many Coptic churches that suit a purpose. And for those people that like to pray in Arabic, they have churches for that purpose. There's no problem because they also would like a place to feel culturally at home. No problem. No one's saying shut down these churches. But Orthodox churches that are a light to the country around them have to have these guiding principles. The same principle that guides us when we have Arabic services, when we have Greek-speaking services. It's the same principle. So they can understand. So that they can understand as well. That makes sense?
What if I'm a deacon in the church and I really enjoy my own voice in Coptic? Do you think that's a disservice to the congregation if I'm really pushing for Coptic in an English service?
Yes, I do. I think it is a disservice. The Coptic language has a richness and has a place at certain times, but no one in the congregation understands. As a deacon, you should be looking back. You are not praying for yourself, you're praying for the people. And when you pray for the people, you look back and look at the person, the teenager, the young child. Is this benefiting them spiritually? Are they worshipping God with their mind in this moment with this hymn? If the answer is no, you need to stop immediately and reflect on what you are doing. Why are you, because you feel this nostalgia and pride that I know this hymn in a different language and I want to sing it, what about the people behind you who don't know it? What about the people behind you who literally don't understand the words? Because no one can understand those words because those words, are an ancient language that doesn't really exist anymore. So this is not me saying that we should cut Coptic out of services or anything like that. My point is we are here to enrich the congregation. The deacon's job is to enrich the congregation, to allow them to worship God with their whole mind.
Yeah, that speaks deep. It's deep. Especially for me because it was a stumbling block when I was coming into Orthodoxy. I remember going to church and thinking like, don't really understand what's going on. And I remember looking at the Coptic and I would read the English next to it and just try and track along with the English just to understand what was going on. And it was a bit of a stumbling block. And I remember thinking like, I have to learn this to understand what's going on and sort of like these hymns and stuff. There is one part of me that enjoyed it a lot though, because it feels like it's like traditional. It's quite ancient. It's quite like something passed through for the past 2,000 years or whatever it is. That it's like the original church. Is that the value of it? Is it that it's something that we're holding on to from the start? And if we have that sort of idea of just to assimilate to the cultures around us, will it get sort of pushed in the back? Because I'm sure I know a lot of people who think like, if we don't hold it tightly, it's going to pass away and we're going to be the generation to drop it off.
Well, let's think about it logically. Why did they start praying in Coptic in the first place? Because Coptic was the language of the rural people of Egypt. Greek was the language spoken in the Alexandria, and Coptic was the language of the rural people. So they started praying in Coptic so that people could understand. So the very purpose of Coptic in the first place was to enable people to worship in a language that they understood. We have now held on to that as if that has some meaning beyond that. If that's the case, well, actually, Greek is the original. Why don't we all worship in Greek?
Yeah.
And Russian, for example, is a much later language. They're holding on to that Russian as if it's something important as well. But why don't we all go back to the Greek, which is the original language, or Aramaic? It's not a language that is important. It is the ability to worship God with our own minds and with our own understanding. So I think that sometimes there's a nostalgic feel. Yes, this is authentic. This is authentic. But actually, the only reason it's authentic is because it was changed to that language many years after Christ. It was changed to that language to enable the local people of Egypt to worship in their local language, not a exalted language, not a special language, not a sanctified God-given language, just the language that they were speaking, which was Coptic. And then when the Arabs took over, that language slowly died and was replaced with Arabic, which then became the bulk of the service was in Arabic because that was the language that people understood. So really, I think if we look at it historically, we kind of understand the place it should have.
Yeah, so I think that's a great segue into our parable for today, the parable of the Good Samaritan. So I guess we'll get straight into it. Father Sam, if you could read for us. I think we'll just go, so it's Luke chapter 10, verse 25 to 37. I think we'll just start by reading verses 25 to 29. talk a bit about that, and then we'll just move on further after.
And behold, a certain lawyer stood up and tested him, saying, Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life? He said to him, What is written in the law? What is your reading of it? So he answered and said, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. And he said to him, You have answered rightly. Do this, and you will live. But he, wanting to justify himself, said to Jesus, And who is my neighbor?
Thank you. So I actually really like the start of this parable. I like how it sets it up. And the parable of the Good Samaritan is like borderline the most famous one. Like, I think everyone knows the phrase "You're a Good Samaritan," or we see it everywhere. See it on like churches, schools, buses, whatever. There's a law, I believe, called the Good Samaritan law. So it's like, yeah, very famous. And a lot of people know about the words Good Samaritan without knowing the Bible at all, or like where it even came from. But I love how it starts. It's a lawyer who's testing Christ about how to inherit eternal life. And I love how he just answers it rightly. And Christ says, Yep, you're right. Do this and you will live. Great. But yeah, so he answered from his like an Old Testament background. So Deuteronomy 6:5 says, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, with all your strength. Leviticus 19:18 says, You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. So it's like combining those two laws. And I think, what do you guys think of that? So like those are the first and second most important laws. Often we think of the Ten Commandments and all these things Christ said and or what God tells us in the Old Testament. But he dwindles it down to those two things. What do you guys think about that?
Well, in the Gospel of Matthew, the same kind of passage comes up where a lawyer stands up and says, Good teacher, what must I do, to inherit eternal life? And he says the same thing. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your strength, with all your soul. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On this hang all the law and the prophet. So everything in the Old Testament is fulfilled in this. Every law, every commandment, every act is fulfilled in this. And not only that, every commandment in the New Testament, every commandment that exists, the whole relationship with God and with other people around us is fulfilled in this one verse. If we do what is said here, then we have fulfilled everything that God has put us here to do. To love him with all our heart, with all our soul, with all our strength, and through that love, not independent of that love. It has to be through that love to love our neighbor as ourselves, And so I think you're right. We don't need to worry about anything else. If we do just this, then we have fulfilled the law and the command.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think that the Old Testament has a really good way of explaining how we are to love the Lord our God. But I think the switch is in the New Testament. We're trying to understand what it looks like to love our neighbor as ourselves. And I think it's a really great way to tee it up, because he asks, and who is my neighbor? And we'll go on to read more about that. I think, we'll jump straight in.
With the next one? Yeah.
Then Jesus answered and said, A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, who stripped him of his clothing, wounded him, and departed, leaving him half dead. Now by chance a certain priest came down that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise a Levite, when he arrived at that place, came and looked, and passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion. So he went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and he set him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. On the next day, when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I come again, I will repay you. So which of these three do you think was neighbor to him who fell among the thieves? And he said, He who showed mercy on him. Then Jesus said to him, Go and do likewise.
If you're going to give a 2-minute sermon on that passage, what would you say?
That's a good question. I love what I love about this passage is, like I mentioned earlier, is that when you love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, God becomes my entire focus. And when God becomes my entire focus, my relationship with Him is special. I know how He looks at me. I know how He loves me. I know that He looks deep within all of the, or beyond all of the corruption and, ways I have destroyed myself through sinful living. And He sees deep, and He sees a son of God. So a priest, when he went and saw him, he would have seen someone who was unclean, someone who was dirty, someone who had blood on him, and he didn't want to make himself unclean with that by attending to that person. A Levite who was meant to uphold the law, the same reason. He said, I want to uphold the law. I want to be clean according to the Old Testament rules. If I go there, I'm not going to be able to pray, and do my service in the temple because I have to clean this person. Forget it. I'm not going to do it. So you can see immediately that they've elevated the rules and the rituals of the Old Testament above the heart of the law. And what does Jesus say about those people? Hypocrites. You have made the commandment of God to no effect by your tradition. So the commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. But the Samaritan, somebody who would have hated him and been hated by this person, didn't worry about how unclean he was. He had compassion on him, and he saw him for what he was, which was a child of God. Because this Samaritan loved the Lord his God with all his heart, with all his soul, with all his strength, with all his mind. And because he loved God that much, he knew that God loves him that way. And when God loves me that way, I have to love everyone else in the same way that God loves me. And that is not to look at what's on the outside, how sinful they are, what they look like, where they come from, what they've done to me. I have to see beyond all of that and see them with the eyes that God looks at them, with the same eyes that God looks upon me when I have rejected him and I sinned against him time and time again. But he absorbs all of that, and what does he give back? Love. So this Samaritan saw all of that. He saw this person and looked to the heart of who he was, had compassion, and went and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. So I think that's what I would say about that passage.
Yeah, that's really good. I like reading into the context of the story, and thinking, like, reading it, putting myself in the shoes of the lawyer. At the time, that question, and who is my neighbor, I think to the majority of the Jews at the time, they would say my neighbor is a fellow Jew.
That's right.
And anyone outside of that is my enemy.
Absolutely.
So I think that when we take that into account, and understanding that a Samaritan, so at the time Jews hated Samaritans, they were mixed race developed from the intermarriage between Hebrews of the northern kingdom of Israel and Assyrian settlers, as well as other pagans. So they saw them as people who sort of intermarrying outside of what was
the Jewish faith,
the Jewish family, which at the time was very lawful. And they built their own temple, offered their own sacrifices, according to the Mosaic law. And even if a Samaritan came up to a Jew and wanted to convert and become Jewish, no Jew would allow it. So they would banish them off. So it's very, very obvious that there's this very big divide, and we can obviously read into that story who we sometimes see as our enemies. So for someone so for him hearing that, and it's kind of understanding that Christ is teaching us what it actually looks like to love our neighbor as ourselves. And loving our neighbor is, if not most importantly, the person who we don't see as our neighbor, often in many cases. So yeah, and on top of that, Jerusalem to Jericho, it was a long trek, and it says a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho. So Jerusalem, is like on a high hill, Mount Zion, and going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, it was like, I think, I have here 1,000 meters in elevation and 40 kilometers in distance. So it was a really treacherous journey, and people would nickname it in the first century the Bloody Way. So it was quite dangerous at the time. So yeah, those are a few things contextually that I saw. But yeah, what do you guys think about that? So like, are we called to go to the bloody way and preach? And I think that a lot of different, maybe in my eyes, a lot of Protestant circles really emphasize that idea of mission and going and preaching to those who are in like really bad conditions and are struggling. Is that our call? Is that our mission?
I think that absolutely it's our call to witness our faith in whatever way is thrust upon us. For some people, this means going to foreign countries. For the vast majority of people, it means witnessing just to the people around us and witnessing to people who are our enemies, people who don't love us, people who are angry with us, people who reject us, people who despise us. Our job is to witness love to those people. This is the point of the message, that your neighbor, it says in Matthew chapter 5, it says, you've heard it said to those of old, love your neighbors, hate your enemy. But I tell you to love your enemy. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. So for us to witness, that's a real witness. What credit is it to you, if you love those who love you? Even sinners do that. There's no credit to that. There's credit to love those who do not love you. And so witnessing in that sense can be in a myriad of ways in our own day-to-day lives. Witnessing to people who have wronged us, witnessing forgiveness, witnessing love and mercy to those who have rejected us, witnessing not being angry and bitter to someone who has really wronged us. This is a way that we can really prove our love, and everyone around us, we have to understand they are my neighbor, every single person. Sometimes we fall into this danger of cliques. We think, no, we've got to serve our own. We've got to, make sure our own are served first. Who is our own? Our own is every single person around us. We often vilify people. They're this religion, or they're this, or they're that, and we vilify them. This is not what Christians are meant to do. Everyone is my neighbor. Everyone should be loved as though they were my own child. I think that sometimes we set up Christianity can become a bit militant, where we are angry because, in our faith, so many people are against us this day and age. And we have Christians that become political and go and protest and all of these things. I ask, is this what we're called to do? Are we called to go protest and be angry that people are taking away our rights? Is this what we're called to do? Or are we called to absorb their anger and their hatred and give them back love? Are we called to love them regardless? Are we called to be the whipping boys of the whole world, just like Christ was? If we have him as our example, then even when people are trying to take away our rights and destroy us and crucify and spit on us, we never react. We never get angry. We never fight back. We give them love, only love in return.
I remember I sat your course in the theological college, and this sounds like the same sort of, to get persecuted, specifically in the early church. That's how Christianity spread.
Yes.
Not through protesting, not through defending your faith, but through persecution and bloodshed.
Absolutely.
Do you think you can talk to us about that?
Well, you think about it from in 300 years, Christianity went from a nothing religion, a nobody carpenter, and a few illiterate fishermen to, consuming the whole of the Roman Empire. How did it happen? We always got to ask, how did it happen? Not one Christian lifted a sword. Never. Not one Christian fought back. There were no protests. There were no riots. There was nothing. All there was each individual Christian witnessing through their own blood. Saying, I'm a Christian, do whatever you like. I love you, whatever you want to do to me, I'm not going to deny my faith. And this is rare. This is unheard of in the history of a world movement. If you think about how other religions spread, not this way. And so now, after this is our witness, is our example, do we take up the sword now? Do we jump online and fight people, and get angry and defend our faith online in a way that is angry and leaves us feeling bitter and frustrated? Why? They didn't do it in the early church, and they converted the whole empire. Why do we need to do it now? Why do we need to go and fight and be angry and gather a mob and a protest and get angry at people? Why do we need to do that? That's not what Christianity has done in the past. And it's been far more successful in the past. I never met anyone who was converted through a mob or through violence. That's not the way we convert people. We convert people through witnessing love and really divine love, radical love, self-sacrificial love. That's the way we demonstrate to people our faith.
Yeah, that's a great take. I think that, and it speaks exactly to the Good Samaritan. This is a person who would have been hurled and ridiculed and persecuted by that, what we likely to believe is a Jew on the road, because they're coming from Jerusalem, so the road from Jerusalem to Jericho. So that's the very person that, if anyone had a right to go and kick him and spit on him a bit more, it was that Good Samaritan.
Absolutely.
Wouldn't have been a very good Samaritan, but I mean, to the other Samaritans, he probably would have been. That is the turning point. It's like when the priest walks by the fellow neighbor to that Jew on the side of the road, a Levite who is of the clan of the sort of like the holy people that were designated. They both walked past, but the Good Samaritan, who had all the right to, because he was the very person that would get persecuted by that person, showed compassion, it says. And he showed immense compassion. So it says he went to him, bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine, and then he set him on his own animal. He brought him to an inn. He took care of him. On the next day when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, which is like 2 days' wages, gave them to the innkeeper and said to him, take care of him. Take whatever more you spend, and when I come again, I'll repay you. So it's this, obviously he's spending his time, his money, he's changing his plans, he's setting time aside, and I don't think you want to be changing your plans when you're on the bloody way through that path. So
Absolutely.
it's like prioritizing, I think, what is more important. And how many times do we walk on the side of the road and see someone and be like, oh, I'm rushing. If you got me like when I wasn't rushing, when are we not rushing?
Even if we have a different opinion from someone. So I know online, so specifically on Instagram, people comment on the sections because, so apparently there's this big argument against Eastern Orthodox versus Oriental, and the Eastern Orthodox people will be like, oh, these guys aren't Christians, blah, 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 blah. So, and there's a big debate on that everyone's saying, oh, these guys are heretics. But then you ask them how or why, like, oh, they're schismatics, and then, so what do you think about that? And like, is it something that we can do as a church, or are the Eastern Orthodox supposed to be the Good Samaritan too?
Look, I think that is something that, once again, this is a political problem. It's a geographical problem. It's not a spiritual or theological problem. It's something that our rulers have actually agreed in principle, that we're all saying the same thing. But it's up for them to figure out. For us, we are one church. For us, we are unity. They want to hate us. They want to say you are heretic. We are not. We love you. We don't believe you're heretics. You are our Orthodox brothers and sisters. We are one church. Maybe in Greece it's fine because they don't have Coptic people they need to deal with. Maybe in Russia it's fine. Maybe in Egypt it's fine. We don't have to deal with it. But here, we're all together. And when we come all together, we actually realize that there are no things that differentiate us. We are the one and the same. Our faith is the same. Our practice is the same. Our saints are the same. Our values, our sacraments, everything is the same. So if all of these things are the same, on our level, at a ground level, we are demonstrating unity and love. The political, confusing, complex issues, that's for somebody else to work out. That's for the higher ups. But for me and my Greek brother and sister, my Russian brother and sister, we are Orthodox, and there is nothing that separates us or differentiates us. And in the eyes of God, if Christ was here today, he would say the same thing 100%. So I think that that's the way I see it. On a ground level, we are one and we are the same. The politics and all of that, that's for somebody else to figure out. I do love what you said about the extra things that he did. I love that point because it's radical. We're called to be radical, not to just do the bare minimum. This Samaritan, he could have done much less and still been a good Samaritan. But he did everything and more. And, when I think about that, I just think of Christ. And I think he could have done much less. He didn't have to die that death. He didn't have to be spat upon. He didn't have to be scourged before he was crucified. He didn't have to be rejected by everyone. His best friends left him. He didn't have to go through all of that. But he did it. And St. Isaac the Syrian says he went that extra mile just to show us how much he loves us. He didn't have to do it. The only reason he did it was to demonstrate his love for us. And if that's how far he goes to demonstrate his love for us, how far do we go to demonstrate our love for him and for his children? We always got to keep that in our mind. Christianity is a radical religion. It's not a normal religion. It's not to do a set of rules. It is so radical because Christ was radical. What he did was demonstrate radical love to us, and we have to show that same love back to him and to our neighbours, which is everyone.
What if I've given and I'm so burdened and I'm like, I can't give anymore? Is it my own excuses? Is there something in me that can give more, but I'm just making excuses? Or is there a limit?
So the most important thing is to do everything under guidance. I'm not making decisions for myself. I have a spiritual father who I ask, on a case-by-case basis. Because sometimes, actually, I can't give anymore. Sometimes there are people who trigger me. Maybe there's a baggage in the relationship that actually means I can't serve this person properly. I can love them from afar. I can pray for them from afar. But actually, if I try and help them, it becomes a bit toxic for me or for them or whatever because of the baggage in the relationship for whatever reason. I'm not called to serve everyone individually, but I'm called to love and to pray for everyone. So if there is a service or a person that is too burdensome, then under guidance, I am able to take a step back and not do it because it may not be right for me spiritually to do it in this moment. But I have to have the same love for them. I have to pray for them. And I have to have no ill will or any bitterness in my heart towards anyone. But that doesn't mean that I have to be best friends with everyone. I have a really close relationship with everyone. I just have to love them. Does that make sense?
Yep, makes sense.
Yeah, so do you think it's our duty to be the Good Samaritan? Like, is it our just pure responsibility? And if we're not doing that, we're actually, if anything, maybe being sinful? Like, if is it something that we should just be taking into our stride? Because this act seems extremely like compassionate, extremely directive. I once had a Good Samaritan approach me. I was driving back from somewhere. It was like midnight, and my tire popped, and like I don't know how to fix a tire. I've never been taught.
And say that to your girlfriend.
Yeah, terrible. No, but yeah, I don't know how to do it. So I was on the side of the road. I was obviously looking like I was struggling, and someone's driving home from work to his family, and he stops on the side of the road. He helped me with the tire. Extremely nice, and I was like, let me like repay you in some way. Let me give you money. He was like, his actual words were, no, don't give me anything. But just next time, if you see someone on the side of the road with his tire popped, just help him out. and like, wow. And I think that that's the essence of, if anyone's going to turn to your belief system, it's through that. It's not through you telling them, but it's you being like, I'm going to do this for you, and just do it for someone else, not me specifically. I don't want any reward myself. Do it for someone else. Is that act just pure duty, responsibility even? Are we, something that I often think about is like, is it our responsibility to carry the burden of others?
Yeah, it says, St. Paul says in Galatians, bear each other's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. But like we said, bearing in mind that I can't actually wear some burdens because it may be too heavy for me. I may not have the expertise to wear it. So I bear their burdens through my prayers. When I say responsibility or duty, I don't like the idea of saying I have to do these things and I feel this guilt if I don't do it. I don't like that idea. I think that if we go back to the commandment that he said, and we stick to that first one, if you love God and you see how much he has done for me and you feel it within yourself, you will want to emulate them. You will want to become Christ-like. So through your relationship with God, service overflows from that. But if my service is independent because I feel like, oh yeah, I've got these noble ideas that I have to serve people and do all of these good things because, you know, that's the right thing to do. And really, a part of me would just be very chuffed when they talk about it and when other people hear about how good Samaritan I was, you know, and their praise makes me feel so good. Then this is really, you've had your own reward. When he says, you know, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Do not sound the trumpet before you in the synagogues and in the streets. You know, when people see you and you have your glory, you've got your reward from them already. But when it flows from a deep relationship with God and a deep conviction that God has loved me to this extent, and I must love him back and his children, I must look at them the same way he looks at me, I will naturally go the extra mile. It'll become second nature for me to do whatever it takes for anyone. If anyone needs, I will go that extra mile. It's like a fountain flowing within me of love for everyone around me. It's not a duty. It's love. Like when we have our kids, it's not a duty, correct? It's the love that makes us do it. When we are married, it's the love that makes us sacrifice for our spouse. And it's the same thing in this case. It's the love that I have for them, the divine love, that makes me serve them. And the closer I am to God, the more this divine love will flow. So that's the first and only obligation. If you do that, actually everything else flows from it. If you do that first commandment, everything else flows from that first commandment, in my opinion.
There's a Christian book called Boundaries, and the whole book is pretty thick about setting boundaries. Okay,
Lots of boundaries.
And I found the book to be anti-Christian.
Yeah, too many boundaries.
because if you look at this parable, you help without condition. Okay, so should I have boundaries? Should I set myself boundaries, or should I have the heart to help everyone? And if they come my way, I have the heart to help them, or should I have boundaries?
Everyone's different. So some people, they have a very easygoing personality and it just flows naturally and they don't hold, you know, the burdens too heavily. They can give. Mother Teresa didn't have any boundaries. She just gave, you know. Saint Damien the leper went to an island off Hawaii and became a leper. You know, he wasn't a leper. He went to serve the lepers in a colony. He didn't have any boundaries, you know. So I'm certain within that context, Saint Mother Teresa has certain boundaries within that context. But really, on the whole, it's pretty open love and pretty open service. So everyone's different. But if I find that my service or relationships are causing me mental anguish or mental health problems or, you know, real struggles, I have to reassess, you know, where I'm directing my service. I have a certain capacity. As I love God, my capacity will increase, but until that time, I still have a certain capacity. And I have to, you know, discover where my capacity is best directed in my service and in my life. So I try and whatever I do with all my heart and with all the love, the divine love that is within me, I do it. Sometimes I have to say, actually, you know what? I can't serve anymore. For example, as a priest, sometimes I have to say, no, I can't do this. I have to spend time with my family. I have to make time to do this. So A priest will set boundaries in order to preserve his family and to protect his family. So I think that boundaries are a good thing. Boundaries are something that protects us, but for a particular purpose, so that I can serve God better. Not so that I can, enjoy myself. No, it's so that I can have some retreat time, for example, so that I can discover God, in silence and solitude, and then go out and give him to the people. You know what I mean? So I have to set those boundaries so that I have that time. I've set those boundaries so I can show the same divine love to my wife and to my children. And so I think that is an important concept, but often we do it under guidance. Sometimes we don't understand where we should apply it or not. So if we have a spiritual father who can guide us and say, actually, makes sense, do this, do that, then my conscience is clear. It's on him, not on me.
Obviously, we understand, like, if we're seeing someone on the side of the road and they're in a certain state, similar to this situation, obviously help them to the maximum of our ability, and something small that we can give them might be a really big thing in their life. How do we take that in the terms of relationships? So, like, for example, I'll have a friend come up to me and be like, "Oh, what do you think of this person for me?" It might be a girl he's interested in, and they have completely different worldviews, completely different likeness. But he's just attracted to her, to be honest. And he'll come and tell me that, and then I'll just be like, and I'll be like, "Do you think it'll really work out?" And he'll be like, "Oh, I'll just be the Good Samaritan. I'll take her under my wing and show her the way." Is that good in relationships? Is that good in friendships? Is that a sort of turned mindset?
I think that it says very clearly in the Bible, do not be unequally yoked together with unbelievers. So unequally means that I am in a context where I'm not going to get better, I'm going to get worse. They're not going to get better, they're going to make me worse. If I go, I'm going to be a good Samaritan to my group of mates, and they go out drinking every weekend, what's going to happen? I'm going to start drinking every weekend. They're not going to stop drinking and come to church, I'm going to start drinking. When you absorb an individual who is leading a sinful life into a godly group of friends, he will become more godly. So I have to be wise in the way in which I behave. Being a good Samaritan doesn't mean hanging out at the pub with, my friends who, do all sorts of things on the weekend. That's not being a good Samaritan. In fact, being a good Samaritan is witnessing that this is not my lifestyle. Witnessing that even though I'd love to hang out with you, I'm not going to, because this is not how I live. That's actually being a good Samaritan, witnessing far more powerfully than hanging around with them and becoming like them. What makes a Christian attractive is that he is different or she is different. If a Christian behaves like everyone else, what's the attraction? If a Christian swears and gets drunk and carries on, they are witnessing to something but not Christianity. And no one wants them, because they're like, okay, well, you're just like us, so why should I become like you? You behave just like us, why should I become a Christian? And in relationships, it's the same thing. Father Jacob always said, and I think it's very good advice, the only time you can be selfish in your life is when you're choosing a partner. And you choose a partner who is best for you, who is going to bring you up spiritually, who's going to treat you well, who's going to respect you, who's going to make you feel, your worth. All of these things, you choose a partner. And if you've met someone who is not those things, you don't have no obligation, you end it. It's not a good relationship for you. You can be selfish when you're choosing a partner. And that means choosing someone who will take me to the kingdom. I'm not getting married to be happy or to be attracted or to, hold hands and go on nice holidays. I'm getting married for the kingdom, because actually a good spouse will teach you all you need to know about becoming a Christian. Because I will see reflected in my spouse all of my sin. I see reflected in my spouse all of my shortcomings that I have to work on. And so a good spouse is actually there we take each other to the kingdom of heaven. If somebody is a non-believer or does not practice or has no, real interest in the church or the faith, you will become like them, they will not become like you. You will go to the lowest common denominator. So I think keep that in mind, that if you're waiting on someone to change or become, it's not going to happen. You assume the way they are now is the way they'll be forever. If you're happy with them the way they are now, marry them. If you're not happy with them the way they are now, they're not going to change. That's a fair assumption to make.
Yeah, I think I like that distinction between, this is your moment to be selfish. Because obviously the person we're helping on the side of the road isn't going to be our partner, most likely. So yeah, I do like that distinction.
What does it look like, the qualities? Because we did ask a question on Instagram on this topic. So you said there are qualities for you and your partner to have so you can both enter the kingdom. So what qualities should one look for when finding a partner?
The most important thing is they're godly. I want to say that's the most important thing, but it's almost not the most important thing. It has to be there, but the fact that it's there doesn't mean they're the right person. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it has to be there, but even more than that, the love and the respect that they have for me. That's the most important thing. How we treat each other, how we talk, how we interact, how much we love each other. If my spouse, is, for example, new to the faith, I wouldn't say end it. No. If the person loves me and respects me and is open, they can often become better Christian than I am because they will want to follow me in what I'm doing. And they will see Christ in me and they will want that and they're open to it. So it doesn't they don't necessarily have to be going to church every Sunday and confessing regularly and having Holy Communion and all of these things when you meet them, because many people that we meet are not doing those things. But you will recognize quickly whether that godliness is something that's going to come out of them very quickly in the love and the respect that they have for me. When I mention my church, they say, yes, I'd love to be a part of that. I lost my faith because of X, Y, Z, but I've always believed, and this is, what I've been looking for, and I want to be a part of it with you. That's a beautiful thing. Almost more important than the godliness is the love and the respect that they have for me. Because if they're godly and they don't love and respect me, forget it. What's the point anyway? All right, we're going to be godly in separate bedrooms, And when you fight, you're going to fight. Godliness can only overcome so much. So I believe that, when people come and ask me, I ask a few questions about the relationship. I ask, what are your fights like? How excited are you for each other? Do you love and respect? Do they treat you well and put you on a pedestal? And if the answer is yes to all of those things, then I'm reassured regardless of anything else, most of the time. That makes sense?
Yeah, that's really good. I think that one of the things that I think about is it problematic to date outside of your cultural boundaries, or maybe your interdenominational relationships, stuff like that? That problematic?
No, I mean, I attend my church, St. Luke's, is full of people who are interdenominational and from different backgrounds, and it works marvelously if the love and the respect is there, because if the love and the respect is there, I will do anything to make my spouse happy, and she will do anything to make me happy. When you have that together, relationship's going to work. It's going to be beautiful, So even if they're from a different background, but they will do anything to make me happy, and I'll do anything to make them happy, we'll make it work. Yeah. We'll attend this church, we'll attend that church, we're going to attend a church, and we're going to attend church together. And because we have the same values in that regard, we're going to do it together. So I don't think that we have to marry in, because to be honest, most people don't.
Yeah.
Most Egyptians don't marry other Egyptians. Most Greeks don't marry. Most of them are it's a multicultural society, and it's inevitable that we're going to marry outside many of the times. It's not a problem if we have the right principles in mind as we go into a relationship.
Since we're talking a bit about marriage, I heard some of my friends are engaged and they attend the marriage course. And they're saying that in the last year, out of 100 marriages, they divorced 60. It's around 60% divorce rate. Not sure if this is 100% true, but it's around 50%. Why do you think in today's society that marriages fail?
I think there's two main reasons. The first reason is bad choices in the beginning, red flags being ignored, and no, I can make it work, I can sacrifice, I can do all of these, and huge red flags, explosive fights, swearing, carrying on, addictions that are there, from before, but we just turn a blind eye and we go. Those relationships almost always end up in divorce. But if you backtrack, you can see that it was going to end up in divorce regardless, because those red flags were there and those red flags were ignored. So that's pre-marriage problems. Post-marriage problems are often as a result of the pre-marriage problems. But also, in addition to that, I think the psychology in today's society is my spouse needs to make me happy. This is a psychology. And once my spouse stops making me happy, then I'm entitled to look elsewhere for my own happiness. And there are many psychologists who have this line of reasoning. Oh, well, you're not happy, you're not satisfied in your marriage? Look somewhere else. Have an open marriage. All sorts of weird and wacky advice that is given that is so detrimental to the way marriage God gave us. If my understanding of marriage is that I'm not here for my spouse to make me happy, but I'm here to make my spouse happy at all costs, that marriage will work if it's two-way. If it's a two-way street. If I'm going to make my spouse happy at all costs and they're not in the same headspace and they don't care, then it'll be a toxic relationship. It will be a toxic. Some people can endure it. Most people can't. But if both parties go into the marriage with the desire at all costs, I will make my spouse happy, they will have a happy marriage and they will both be eminently happy. Not just happy, they will both be leading each other to the kingdom of heaven. So I think the mentality of, my desires, my needs, my wants, my happiness, I don't love them anymore. All of this way of talking, it's so focused on me and what I want. And if from the beginning of the relationship, this is not the way I think, then, and it's not the way my spouse thinks towards me, then I will be happy. But once again, that's a pre-marriage problem because you've got to find somebody who feels that way towards you.
How long do you think it takes to find these problems in the dating stage?
Certainly within, 3 to 6 months, you should have a good picture, a good grasp. In the first bit, you have a honeymoon period where you don't fight so much. We never fight. And then all of a sudden, we're always fighting.
Yeah.
But certainly within the first 3 to 6 months, you can get a clear picture. Once that honeymoon phase is sort of wearing off and the fights start to creep in, you will see how you fight. You will see how you resolve your fight. You will see the way we talk to each other. We'll see the consideration, the compassion, all of those things. Family problems you'll start as you meet family. And as you start to prepare for a wedding, all of these problems will be aggravated, because getting through a wedding organization, is like a catalyst litmus test for whether you're meant to be together. So, certainly within the first 3 to 6 months, the warning signs will be there.
Father Anthony Messer on one of his sermons said there's no such thing as marriage problems. It's just people with problems getting into marriage. So it's like these things are already there, but you might be hiding it, you might be covering it up, but you might bring it out in each other just through life. Living together, I'm sure, is a tough thing. You're just like, you clash, and when you clash, you're like, oh, I didn't know I had that in me, and so on and so forth. And at church, we were doing a relationship series, and one of the things I think one of the abunas said was our purpose in a Christian relationship marriage is to be holy or make the other holy, not so much happy but holy. It's like bring the other person to Christ, and through that sacrifice, through that giving, you'll get the happiness out of it. And the closer you get to Christ, the actual closer you get to each other. It's kind of like a triangle. So if you're getting closer to Christ and each of you are getting there, you're technically getting closer to each other on the horizontal.
Absolutely.
So that's I enjoyed hearing that when I heard it. Yeah,
it's true. When you get closer to Christ, then your capacity for love increases. Just like for everyone else, same to my spouse. And what I can absorb increases, and how much I can absorb and give back love increases. And when I witness what God has done for me. I want to emulate it for my wife. I want to sacrifice myself for my wife or for my husband. I want to lay down my life for them. I want to give everything for them because Christ has done it for me. Of course, I want to do it for my children and for my spouse.
There's a question here.
Mhm.
Okay. What does it mean if someone is perfect on paper, but I'm not in love with them? LOL.
Then we acted out that LOL.
Look, everything is context. Everything is context. Like, generally speaking, if I'm young, if I'm, the world's in front of me, why are we settling down with someone I don't like? It will manifest in many different ways. Lack of attraction, lack of excitement, boredom, frustration. Why would I settle down with someone? Who cares what they are on paper? What difference does it make? You know, many people go, they're so perfect, and then we go out for dinner and it's like, ugh. Like,
avoid dinner at all costs.
yeah, it's like boring. Like, I'm just not excited. I go, well, why are you in it?
Yeah.
If you're not excited, why are you in it? Now, look, that can change in certain contexts, and so I think that it's not a hard and fast rule to really reject it based on that. But generally speaking, if I'm thoroughly uninterested in a person, why am I marrying them? Just because they're perfect on paper, who cares? They're perfect on paper for somebody else, not for me. And this person is not perfect on paper, but we just work. It clicks. It's just amazing. That's going to work. This is not going to work, generally speaking. So I think that would be my general advice to people. But like I said, context is everything. And sometimes, we say no, pursue it, see how it goes, for different reasons.
So another question here. So opinion of feeling peace if someone's meant for you / confusion if they're not. Can you feel confusion if someone's meant for you and still be in a healthy relationship?
Yeah, I think so. I think that is confusion is a normal part of our lives. Even in our spiritual lives, we're often confused. God, is this what you want from me? Am I pleasing you? Am I doing the right thing? And this is a good thing because I'm striving. I'm working at it. I'm discovering. I'm like, tell me, Lord, what I could be doing better. So even in my spiritual life, I'm confused whether God is happy with me. In a relationship, of course, I'm confused. Some people, decisive personalities, like, she's the one, he's the one. I knew it from the moment I met them. We got married. That was it. That's their decisive personality. Doesn't mean anything. It's just their personality. But whereas other people, it takes a longer time. They're indecisive. They catastrophize. They're this, they're that. And those people just need to be reassured. Let's look at the numbers again. Let's look at the facts. Are you happy? Yes. Is she or he amazing? Yes. Are you happy? Yes. So why are you doubting? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something better out there for me. Just his thought process. Maybe there's something better out there for me. Some people have FOMO that other people don't have. Some people don't have FOMO. Like, whatever, I don't care. Some people have FOMO. So then the person who has FOMO is always going to be like, maybe there's something better out there for me. All they need to do is like, there's not. There's nothing better out there for you. They need reassurance. And it doesn't mean that just because they're having those feelings, doesn't mean they're in a wrong relationship. They're going to have those feelings no matter what relationship they're in. And they need to work through them, and really, those people need to go back to the facts, go back to their groundings and reassure themselves and really, look at it on its merits. Red flags, green flags, feelings, all of those things. So I think that it's not a bad sign for people to have confusion. I think most people have some to a lot of confusion when choosing their partner. If we keep the principles in mind, then we won't go astray. We'll make the right decision. And if we're praying and giving this decision to God, the right decision will be made. Whatever happens will be the will of God. If I marry this person, I prayed through it. I held on to God throughout the whole process. It was a godly relationship and we got married. Therefore, this is the will of God for me that I've married this person. So actually having a good, close relationship with God cuts through all of that confusion. Because if it happens, God wanted it to happen. It's the will of God. I don't have to think about it anymore.
Yeah. I do think that a lot of people find it really difficult and that indecisiveness comes from the idea of like, oh, I'm going to be with this person forever. So like, let me take forever to decide.
That's right.
And then I'll get the right one sometime. There's a video also from Father Josiah Trenham. It was the same father as the one we showed you earlier. And it's kind of echoing this sort of level of like, marriage is needed. You need to take that not lightly at all. It's a very, very big deal. And this is probably what makes everyone indecisive, but we'll give it a quick look.
When Jesus taught his disciples what true marriage was, they were completely scandalized. As a matter of fact, the apostles, these aren't just the normal people. These are his closest disciples. When they listened to Jesus' teaching about the permanence of marriage, about the fact that fidelity was non-negotiable, that there was no such thing as divorce, they were so scandalized that they said to him, Lord, if marriage is like this, it's better not to get married. Jesus lifted up Christian marriage and explained that it is inviolable, that divorce and remarriage is adultery. He made a very tiny exception, but the normative teaching of the church is divorce and remarriage is adultery. When they heard this, they said, it's better not to get married. And he didn't say, hey, you're misunderstanding me, guys. No, he said, let him who can accept the teaching accept it. For this reason, many are eunuchs by choice. Many choose not to get married because they're going to be held to a high standard.
Yeah, so that one kind of made me feel like, oh, eunuch is a good decision. What are your thoughts on that video?
I think that, like we said, I think he's correct. When we go into marriage, we have to have this frame of mind that is permanent. And that's why we have to be very careful in the way we approach marriage. It's a very calculated decision. It's a very careful decision. It's a very well thought out decision. I'm looking at it from every perspective. I'm taking advice from multiple different sources. I'm analyzing my partner in multiple different circumstances to see whether they're the right one. Because Christ said it. He says, there are eunuchs who've made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of heaven. If you want to be a monk, if you can accept it, go do it. But if you want to get married, then this is the teaching. And I think that's why it has to be held to a high standard, because if we don't go in with that mentality, if we go in, and this is the world now, that, oh yeah, if it doesn't work out, divorce is an option. How much trauma? How much trauma in the relationship? How much trauma to the children? How much all of these things we are so flippant about? We don't worry about. Oh, I can just end their marriage. We'll just have a nice, civil divorce, and no one gets hurt. Everyone gets hurt. So avoid all of this by taking it serious in the first place, in the way I approach my decision with God by my side. If God is not by your side, well, it's your own decision. You may get lucky, you may get unlucky. But if God is holding my hand through it, He's brought me to it, He will get me through.
Yeah, really nice.
Let's say if I'm married and I feel like it's dying out a bit, how can I keep my marriage alive? Or if I'm dating, or if I have a relationship with someone, how can I keep that alive?
If you're dating and the relationship is dying, it's a different. If that's the case, then it's the question of whether we should be continuing. So that's a completely different answer to if I'm married and my relationship is dying. The problem with marriages is that it becomes toxic for so long before we try to get help. And then there is years of baggage, years of hurtful comments, years of accusations, years of, abuse sometimes. And then we say, let's try and fix this. Each hurtful comment, each fight has scarred and worn away the love. And then they come and say, fix us. It's difficult. You can't even hold hands anymore. How are you going to become intimate and connected again? You can't even hold hands. You can't even be in the same room. You can't sleep in the same bed, because how did it get to this point? So it's good when people are very early in the marriage and they struggling, they go get help because they're both open-minded. They both say, what can we do? Let's try and fix this. And always keeping in mind that the loss of intimacy comes in stages, and notice that it's happening and address it quickly, you know. But your guys aren't married, so you didn't even know what I'm talking about.
There's actually a question: under what circumstances should divorce be considered? For example, your scenario just there. It's not a loving relationship, almost impossible to reconcile.
This is a hard question for me to answer. Divorce is never desired, and it always should be the last resort. The teaching of the church is that divorce is under certain circumstances. I know that in other churches, in other Orthodox churches, the teaching is that they do give out divorces in certain circumstances where it's no longer resembling a Christian marriage for whatever reason. I know that that's sort of an idea that's crept in the Coptic Orthodox Church as well, that divorces are given out, you know, in differing circumstances these days. I think that is just a compromise for the sake of the people. Do you know what I mean? Because a relationship is so bad, and really, you know, how are we going to fix it? Me personally, I think that what we always should be doing as a church is striving to keep people together within the context of a healthy marriage. Abuse and all of these things, I don't believe that anyone should live through abuse. I don't believe that anyone should have to live through abuse. I think abuse breaks the bonds of marriage in a way just like, you know, infidelity does. And I don't think that it is responsible to counsel people to stay in abusive relationships. And by abusive, I mean emotionally, physically, financially, all of those things. So I believe that in those cases, you know, that we shouldn't be counseling people to stay in really toxic circumstances, because we have to weigh up the damage that is happening to children in that, witnessing that day to day, the trauma there. But it's a very case by case situation. It requires a very careful analysis of the situation, and you know, I think it's there's no clear cut answer, you know. And sometimes we encourage, and sometimes, you know, some relationships are so bad, you know, infidelity or whatever, in which case, you know, we say, well, actually, this is not a marriage anymore, and it's not helpful, and it's toxic to the children and things like that. But everything on a case by case.
Within those marriages, have you seen like hope, like like in the sense of, has there been that sort of Good Samaritan behavior where one of the parties has been like, I know you're treating me like this, but I'm gonna show love even though I'm getting treated like that, and like the sort of cycle reverses from being a hurt to like a hurt, and then they didn't respond in a hurtful way, and then they kind of like
most of the time what happens, what I see, is that there is a partner who has a spiritual capacity that is superhuman. This is not for us to try and emulate and try and have a spiritual capacity that is superhuman and tolerate a very toxic, abusive relationship. No, I'm not saying it for that purpose. But there are people who have tolerated bad marriages, and, you know, really, I think there's a special place in heaven for them to give back love and love and love, even though they're not getting it back. And often they don't. The other part doesn't change. Often they're just absorbing for the sake of unity, for the sake of love. They've decided to do that. In that case, what can we do? We encourage, and we look at them as examples, and we ask for their prayers, because they are spiritual beacons and spiritual lights for us all. It doesn't mean that we try and be like them by tolerating really toxic, bad relationships. I'm not saying that, but there are examples where that does happen. But that person has a very high spiritual capacity, and not just a very high natural capacity, in addition to a spiritual capacity.
Yeah, because what would most likely happen is that person also becomes toxic and puts that toxicity elsewhere. In
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. To absorb toxicity and only respond with love, that's a one in a million.
Yeah.
That's a one in a
What
million.
if I'm that partner that is always love, but I never give love. I'm just happy that I'm loved and never give it. What can I do to show love? Is it too far gone, like, it's just my personality, or is there things I can do to show love?
There are always things that we can do. That's once again, if I look at my partner and my desire is for their happiness and for their comfort and for their satisfaction and not my own, then that'll color everything that I do. It'll change the way I respond to them. It'll change the way I offer my consideration, all of those things. I have to radically change my mentality. If I'm going into a marriage, I have to have this mentality that I'm here for them. I'm here to make them happy. And if they're happy, if they're comfortable and they're, satisfied, then my job is done. Everyone needs to have this mentality. So if you find that actually your partner's angry and frustrated and you're, just absorbing and taking, and, your partner is just angry at you, start thinking, why? Why? Am I doing something? What can I do to make them happy? And become radical. How much radical love can I show this person to make them happy? Once you're in the marriage, and if everything's been good in the lead up, and you're in the marriage, you'll make it work. You can make it work. It's in your capacity. It's in your power to make this a happy marriage. If your wife is a normal person and she loves and respects you, it is entirely in your control to make your wife happy or make your husband happy. It's entirely in my control. If I sacrifice myself completely, if I die for my spouse, she'll be so happy. So I can do it, And if my capacity is not quite there, then I go to my room. I fall on my knees in prayer and I draw from God that spiritual capacity. I draw from Him. Teach me how to absorb more. Teach me how to accept more and to give myself and to die for my partner. If we have this mentality, especially if in the lead up, it's been a good relationship and my spouse is a good person, generally speaking, but we have just the normal argy-bargy of marriage, then if I understand that I have the capacity to make my wife happy and, so satisfied, then why wouldn't I do it?
Okay, thank you so much, Father Sam, for your time. I'm sure that our viewers really appreciate the conversation. I did. I'm sure you did as well, Chris. Learned a lot from that. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah, and if you have any questions from anything that you heard, or you have any feedback, we love feedback, so feel free to send it over to our Instagram, in our comment section on YouTube, or we're on Upper Room Media as well. I don't think there's a comment section there, but the platforms you can watch it. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Father Sam.